Thank you so much, Ariella, and thank you for everything that you do for SVIVAH and HerTorah. I can't believe that it was 3 years ago when you had this fabulous idea and you made it happen to build a nourishing, inclusive community for Jewish women. And we define Jewish women as anyone who identifies themselves as a Jewish woman. So one of the programs of SVIVAH is HerTorah, where we gather Jewish women to learn with one another in a way that welcomes and actively seeks out diversity of age, religious background, denomination, location, income level, abilities. We want to be a space where women from all different backgrounds can come together and learn together and engage meaningfully with one another. We think that Torah becomes stronger when people who would otherwise never meet or sit in the same space can come together and discuss ideas that are important to all of us. HerTorah meets once a month. Since COVID, we've been meeting on Zoom. Tonight, we have the incredible privilege of learning from Rabbi Avi Strausberg. She's going to be teaching us about fear. And then in a month, we will be moving from fear to joy when we learn with Rabbi Yafa Epstein about joy. Before Rabbi Strausberg starts teaching us, I just wanted to share with you a couple of thoughts that I had inspired by her decision to talk about fear tonight. And I think the reason that she did that is because the days of awe, right, are called the Yamim Noraim, the days of fear and trembling, or the days of awe. And I was thinking about times in the Torah when there is an experience of yirah, of fear. And I made sure not to cover anything that's in her source sheet tonight. But I was thinking about starting really from Bereshit, from Genesis chapter 3, when the man and the woman, Adam and Eve, eat from the tree. And after they do that, they hide. And I want to show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to share my screen for a minute. Okay, so after they eat from the tree, they hide from God among the trees of the garden. And God calls out to the human and says, "Where are you?" And Adam replies, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And it's interesting that this fear by Ira, and I was afraid, comes from knowing that you're not as perfect as you once were, or that the way that you were afraid to be seen, right? That there's something about you that just wants to hide and doesn't want to be seen by God or by others who you respect and admire, and you have a certain way of being that you want to present. And we've got a similar example in Bereshit chapter 18, where Abraham and Sarah are told that Sarah is going to have a child, and Sarah laughs, and we can talk a lot about what it was she was doing when she laughed, but part of it is like she didn't quite believe it, perhaps. And, and she says, she laughs to herself saying, "Now that I am withered, am I to have enjoyment with my husband so old?" And then God says to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I in truth bear a child, old as I am? Is anything too wondrous for God? I will return to you at the same season next year, and Sarah shall have a son.'" And when Sarah sees that God has noticed some sort of inauthenticity or something about her, she lies because she was frightened. And in both of these cases, there's a fear of being seen for what maybe you're not so proud of, or a way that you don't want to represent yourself before God. And that's what constitutes the fear. Just one more case, right? In Bereshit chapter 16, we have a different example. We have the example of Abraham's maidservant, Hagar, who marries Abraham, after Sarah can't have a child. And she runs away, and she has an encounter with an angel of God. And there's this really amazing, the angel of God says, go back. But she then calls the name of God who spoke to her. You are El Roi, Ata El Roi, right? You are the one who sees me, right? And seeing Ra'ah and Yir'ah and fear are very closely related. And she says, why does she call it you are El Roi, the God of seeing? By which she meant, Hagam Halom Ra'iti Acharei Roi. I can't believe that after God saw me, I can go on seeing. And therefore she called the name of the well, Be'er Lachai Roi, the well of the living one who sees me. It's almost as if Hagar feels, right, we all have that fear of being seen for who we are, especially like, what will they see when they see me, when they actually see me? And Hagar can't believe that God saw her and she emerged unscathed. She was still okay. She could still do things. She could go back to Abraham. She could live her life. And so she names the well after the experience of being seen and surviving. And this becomes a touch point for the later, like for Isaac, who goes to visit the well, this Be'er Lachai Roi, the well of the living one who sees me. I was thinking about this a lot because the days of awe are the days when we are seen. We're not always ready to be seen. We're not always ready for a prime time. We stand in the synagogue and we say, I can't believe I'm like this. I can't believe I haven't changed the ways that I thought I would change. And here it is, and God sees me, and I kind of feel like this shame or this fear of being seen in this way. But I wonder if maybe we can also draw some strength from Hagar, who realized that God can see you, and you can still survive, right? Because maybe God doesn't see you only with judgment, but God sees you with love. And maybe instead of feeling the shame and the fear of being seen and being judged, we can have an openness and maybe even looking forward to being seen because we're being seen with love. So I wish everyone a Shana Tova, and I'm so excited to welcome Rabbi Avi Strausberg. She is the Director of National Learning Initiatives at Hadar and based in Washington, D.C. She received her rabbinic ordination from Hebrew College in Boston and is a Wexner Foundation Graduate Fellow. She also holds a master's in Jewish education. Energized by engaging creatively with Jewish texts, she has written several theater pieces inspired by the Torah and maintains a Daf Yomi haiku blog in which she writes daily Talmudic haikus. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Good evening, everyone, or good whatever it is, whatever time zone that you're coming in for. Thank you so much to Rabbi Elisa for sharing that beautiful Torah, and for helping us think about fear from a different perspective, the fear of being seen. I want to, by way of starting, so we're going to be talking about fear. That's our topic here tonight, fear. And I want to start by sharing a personal story. I'll just say, a lot of times, at least for me, the things that I teach about or I write about are the things that the Torah that I need to hear, the things that I'm working through in my own life. And I can definitely share, fear is something that I think about a lot. I would self-describe as being a pretty fearful person. I feel like I'm constantly sort of like navigating and negotiating around my own fears. And so when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I took myself for a year of backpacking around New Zealand. I was meant to go with a friend. She ended up going home, so it ended up just being me. And I took myself on a solo hike up a mountain. I thought this is something that like a brave person should do. I'm gonna like go on this hike. And so it wasn't a big mountain. It really wasn't a huge deal, but I like get myself up, I make the ascent, I get up. There's just really one, there was just like one path up. So I climb the path up, I get up, it's a small area at the top, it's beautiful. I'm looking at the New Zealand vista and it's just wonderful. And then it's time to go back down. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be more exciting and more interesting if instead of going down the path that I just came up, maybe there's another path that I can go down. I should try to do something new. And so I sort of like look around and it seems like that there actually is sort of a path that's like a hidden path that I might also be able to take going down the mountain. And I was torn because on the one hand, I felt, oh, it's like sort of safer, better to go down the path I know. I've already done that. Let me just go down that one. But I thought, no, let me push myself. I'm gonna be brave here. I'm constantly sort of entering these negotiations with myself of, do I listen to my fear? Do I not listen to my fear? So I said, no, I'm going to be brave. I'm not going to listen to my fear. I'm going to go down this other path. And so I start down the path, and it's very steep, but I gave myself a lot of positive self-talk. And I said, don't be afraid. It's okay. You can do this. But it was very, very steep. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to keep going down this path, but like, maybe I'm going to try that like scooting on your butt move. It's like no longer going to walk on my feet. So I sort of like get my down on my tush, and I'm sort of like shimmering down, and I'm like, it's going to be okay. And I do that a little bit more. It's getting steeper and steeper, but I say, you're okay. People can do this. And then as I make it a little way further down, I realize that I'm not, in fact, bravely making my way down a mountain. I'm actually throwing myself off a cliff. I'm not, it's not a path at all. I just like found some path, and I'm like actively throwing myself off of a cliff and not on a path. So I like managed to turn around, and I like pull myself back up and get back on the top of the mountain. And then I like walk down the path that was actually the path. But for me, that's a story that I come back to all of the time. It was a moment, so much of my life I spent sort of in negotiations with my own experience of fear. Is this a fear that I acknowledge and I do the thing anyway? Or is it a fear that it's like trying to keep myself safe, and so I listen to? And that was an experience where I ignored my fear and said, no, I'm going to do it anyway. And that was not actually the correct choice. I want to so just to say, like, if I were to give us like a spectrum of like, 1 being I'm not afraid of anything, and 10 being I super terrified of everything, I want us to just take a minute, and I'll just share. I think I would probably put myself somewhere around like, I don't know, a 6 or a 7. It's like every time one of my like kids does something anywhere, I'm like constantly like audibly gasping all the time, afraid that something is going to happen. So I would say that I'm somewhere, I would say like a 6 or 7 on the spectrum, the fear spectrum. And that's something that I'm really working on, of trying to like move myself sort of towards the other end. I want to, before we actually really dive into the text today, and before we locate the text in the upcoming Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we want to spend just a few moments in breakout rooms. We're going to give you a short breakout, 5 to 7 minutes. Okay, you're not going to have a lot of time. You're going to be put in breakout rooms of 5 people. I'm sure some of them will be there, some of them won't, some of them will be on camera, some of them won't. That's all totally fine. We just want you to take a few minutes, 1, to say hi and to get to know someone, and 2, to share, where would you locate yourself on the fear spectrum? 1 being, I'm not afraid of anything, show me that mountain. 10 being, I am very afraid. And the second question is, how do you feel about where you place yourself on the spectrum? Are you happy with where you are on the spectrum, or would you want to move yourself in one direction or the other? So we're going to go ahead and place you into that breakout rooms now. Don't be worried. You're not going to be there too long. It's just a chance to make that personal connection, to say hi, and then we'll bring you back together and we'll move more into the text-based learning.
What do you think? Should I call them back now?
Sure.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. We'll just wait for the rest of our friends to populate back into this main breakout room. Thank you for joining back in. Wonderful. I think we're all just about gathered back together. Okay, welcome back. Well, thank you for taking those moments to hopefully connect with a few other people to share a little bit about where you are in your own relationship to fear. I would normally love to hear your responses, but you have heard each other's responses. And so with that, we're gonna dig in. So we're talking about fear. Why are we talking about fear right now as we approach Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur? These are the days that we call the Yamim Noraim. Yamim Noraim, Yamim, days, Noraim, coming from the word Norah, connected to the word Yir'ah. This word that really has the dual meaning of awe and fear, the days of awe and fear, that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, these are the days of awe and fear. They're the days where we are being really taught and called upon to actively cultivate a stance of trembling and yir'ah. So depending how you translate yir'ah, a stance of trembling and either awe or trembling and fear, or awe and fear at the same time, a trembling of awe and fear of God. So to the extent that, part of the question we're going to be looking at today is, what should the place of fear be in our lives? When does fear help us? When does it hurt us and hold us back? How should we stand in healthy relationship to our fear? At least on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, on these days, Yamim Noraim, the Jewish tradition is calling on us to be fearful, to actively make sure that we show up on these days and we are afraid. So one of the questions that as we're thinking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as we're thinking about fear, I want to zoom out and think about the place of fear in our lives. And then we're going to zoom back in towards the end and think about, well, what does it mean to be actively trying to cultivate this stance of fear as we approach the Yamim Noraim, as we approach Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But before we do that, I want to start by thinking about Noah. So we're going to be thinking about the story of Noah and the flood. But before we dive into the text, I want to remind you a little bit about the story of Noah. So you might remember Noah is told by God, it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. And so you better go and you're going to build this ark. Everything else in the world is going to be destroyed. Get your family, get some animals on the ark. This is what you have to do. And so Noah hears God's warning and he is appropriately fearful. He builds the ark. The waters come. He gets on the ark and he stays in the ark for 40 days and 40 nights. But you might remember that even once the rain stops, the waters are still so high, the flood waters are so high that Noah can't come back out into the world. So he might have thought that he was going into the ark for 40 days and 40 nights, but it actually ends up being many, 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 many more months that he stays in the ark waiting for the world to feel safe enough, for the world to be a safe place to return to. So it's actually something like, it's crazy. It's something like 7 months goes by, 10 months goes by until the water recedes enough that just the tops of the mountains are visible. And then even then, when the tops of the mountains are visible, it's still not a safe world for Noah to go back out into. And I'll just for a second, just to paint you a picture, the Torah tells us that literally everything that had the hint of breath in its nostrils was perished and destroyed. So the world, just to think for a second, what is the world that Noach is waiting to return to. It's a world that has actually been totally annihilated, totally wiped out. And so just for a minute, put yourself in the shoes of Noach, who is responsible for all of the life on the ark, and imagine what would it have been like for Noah to be safe in this ark, to see the world destroyed outside, and he's waiting, he's looking for a sign and trying to figure out, I was told to go in here for 40 days and 40 nights, but when is it going to be safe to come out? When can I leave this ark? What is the world going to be like? And so many, many months go by. Finally, the waters recede enough and the land is dry. There's no more water. The land is dry. Noach sends out the raven to test. Is it safe to go into the world? The raven goes out and the raven doesn't come back. Noach sends out the dove. The dove goes out, the dove comes back. It's not safe yet. The dove isn't able to find a place to land. The dove goes out a second time and comes back, this time with the olive leaf, the sign that there is life repopulating on this world. And that should have been a sign to Noach that it was time, that it was safe to leave the ark, but Noach still doesn't leave the ark. He waits 2 weeks, the Torah tells us, and then he actually waits another 2 weeks, this additional 2 weeks, and then Noach again sends out the dove. This time the dove goes out, and amazingly, still, Noach doesn't leave the ark. At this point, he's been in the ark something like a year and a half. He went in for 40 days and 40 nights, and he just keeps waiting and waiting and waiting for the world to be safe again. Now he actually has the proof that the land is dry. The dove comes back with a leaf and the dove is able to go back into the world. And still Noach isn't ready to leave the ark. It doesn't feel safe yet. And it's only until God commands Noach to leave the ark that he actually leaves the ark. So I'm going to go ahead and share into the chat the source sheet for today. And I'm going to officially go into screen sharing so that we can see some of these texts together. So just to give you a sense of our structure tonight, we'll do some learning. We'll be in screen share mode. We'll do some learning, and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn to the chat and want to hear all of your thoughts. And then we'll go back into some more text and again, go all into the chat. So while I'm teaching and working through the text, I'm not going to really be following the chat, but I'm absolutely going to turn to the chat and open it up to hear your thoughts once we see a little bit more text. Okay, so I'm going to go into pull up the text here. Okay. So we see, so Noach is still in the ark. The dove has gone, the raven's gone, not come back. The dove is gone, come back. It's not ready yet. The dove goes again, comes back with the olive leaf. Noach sends this dove out a third time. This time the dove doesn't come back, and Noach still doesn't leave the ark, only until Vayedaber Elohim el Noach lemor, God speaks to Noach saying, Set min ha-teva. God commands Noah, go out from the ark. It's time. You and your wife and your sons' wives, bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and animals and everything that creeps on earth, and let them swarm on the earth and be fertile and increase. And so finally, Noach comes out together with his sons, his wives, and his sons' wives. It's only when God commands Noach and says, it's time, Noach, it's time to leave the ark, does Noach leave the ark. And not only does God command Noach and say, is it time to leave the ark, but actually God says, it's time to start repopulating the world. It's time to turn away from this death and to really actively take a step toward life, to bring lots of life back into this world. So there's a beautiful midrash, there's a beautiful interpretation on this section of Genesis that comments on this and says, the Baracher, here's an opinion quoting from the book of Ecclesiastes, L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose. This is the sort of like the well-known, you may have even heard it in song form. There's a time for everything. There's a time for mourning and a time for rejoicing, a time for dancing and a time for weeping, a time for sowing and a time for planting, right? So this is saying there's a time for everything. So let's see what the midrash is going to do with this. Zman haya leNoach likanes leteva. There was a time for Noach to go into the ark. There was a time when the safe and appropriate course of action was to go into the ark. How do we know this? It says in Bereshit, in Genesis, Bo ata v'chol beitecha el teva, that God says, come you and your household into the ark. Uzman hayalo sheyitzeh mimenu. And there was a time when the correct thing to do, the right thing to do, was to come out from the ark. How do we know this? Shene'emar, it says, Se min hateva, that God says, God commands Noach, saying, come out from the ark, go out from the ark. Velo kibel alav letzet. But Noach, he didn't accept upon himself to go out. He wasn't willing to go out. How do we know this? Amar, Noach says, Etzeh ve'yeh pareh ve'raveh leme'era. I will go out and I'll be fruitful and multiply for a curse. It seems like Noach is saying something like, I don't trust this world anymore. Now that I see how quickly and how easily all of civilization can be annihilated and destroyed, now that I've seen the loss and the fragility of this world, I don't know about this world anymore. Not only is he, I think, scared to leave the ark, he says, what's the point of it all? Am I really going to come out and I'm going to fulfill this command to be fruitful and multiply for what? So that life can be destroyed again for a curse? Until God swears and promises that God won't bring another flood to this world. How do we know this? Shene'emar, quoting from the book of Isaiah, Ki mei Noach zot li asher nishbati me'avor mei Noach, that God says, for this is the waters of Noach to me, for as I have sworn, the waters of Noach should no more go over the earth. The idea here is that God calls the flood the waters of Noach, because it was Noach, according to this midrash, it was Noach that made God promise to never again bring the floods again. And we see this also in Genesis itself, that God says that God puts the rainbow in the sky as a reminder of the covenant that God will never again bring a flood to destroy the world. The idea being here of this midrash is that there was a time when the sensible, the correct course of action was to hole up and to go into the ark. And there was a time to come out of the ark, but when that time came, Noach wasn't ready. He was scared. He wasn't willing. And it was only until he extracted this promise of God was he ready to take a step out. So the question that I want to ask you here in the chat, sort of a two-part question here. I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing. And you can also feel free to just come on mute. You can either answer in the chat or come on mute. The question here is, one is, how do you understand fear in this story? To what extent do you see this fear as being a healthy fear that's helping Noach, that's keeping him safe? To what extent do you see this fear as a harmful fear that's holding Noach back? And do you at all see yourself in this Noach story? How is it resonating with you today? And you can go ahead and you can put that in the chat, or you can go ahead and just unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you. So Sherry says, if only we could always have that clear guarantee from Hashem that all would work out well. Right. So it's interesting in the Noach story that to the extent that Noach is hesitating or unsure, Noach actually has something. He gets something from God that says, this is the moment. No, it's okay. You might not be sure, but I'm telling you, it's okay. And I'm promising you it's going to be okay. For those of us, if we are in places of our lives where we're feeling unsure or hesitant, is it safe? Can I leave the ark? We're on the whole sort of like left in that ambiguity of not knowing, of having to sort of sit with ourselves, negotiating our own fear of, should I go out? Should I not go out? That Noach in the story, he gets that clarity from God. Great. Okay, so Cecilia says Noach's fear is realistic given what he has experienced. Okay, good. So Cecilia is saying Noach sees the world totally annihilated and destroyed. It makes sense that he's a little afraid to leave in the ark, that he's waiting until he gets this promise from God, that it's reasonable that it was taking him many, many months to come out. Okay, great. So Jessica says, if I could extract a promise from God, I would ask for it. The fear of the unknown, the floods, the fires, the earthquakes, the car accidents, the cancer, the heartbreak, can never be removed. We have to leap into life without that promise. So Jessica, that's just so beautiful. That sentence of yes, sort of echoing what Sherry was saying, we're not necessarily able to extract those promises from God. And so what it means to live in this world is to, like, to the extent that you are someone like me that is holding fear, you have to hold that fear and also leap into life without that promise. It's beautiful. So Devorah says, it's also interesting because God saved him, but he's skeptical of everything that happened around him. Right, it's interesting. You know, there's an interpretation that says, there's always that question of why does Abraham argue on behalf of the people of Sodom that God is going to destroy them, but why doesn't Noah argue? And one of the interpretations there is Noah doesn't actually believe that God is going to do it, or Noah doesn't believe that he's any better than anyone else, that Noah thinks, well, if God is going to destroy the world, God's certainly not going to save me. Why would God listen to me? That Noah doesn't believe enough in himself. And I sort of wonder, Devorah, there, that it's like, on the one hand, God spared him, but if there's like a sort of survivor's guilt or anxiety that Noah doesn't really trust his own place with God, or that God wouldn't do it again, like, why did God save me this time? It could be different the next time.
Totally.
Sarah says, was he more scared to leave the ark than he was to come onto the ark? That's so interesting. So Sarah, there's also another interpretation. In the Torah, it says that Noah goes into the ark miknei hamabul, because of the floods. And as Rashi says there, he doesn't go into the ark because God commanded him to, because God said to build the ark. He goes into the ark because of the floods. And Rashi says that actually Noah was a ma'amin ve'no ma'amin. He believed and he didn't believe. He believed enough in the threat from God that he built the ark, but he didn't believe enough to actually get into the ark until the waters of the flood knocked him down and pushed him into the ark, which is to say, another way to say that he believed and he didn't believe is that he was afraid and he wasn't afraid. He was afraid enough that it motivated him to take some sort of action and to build the ark, but he wasn't actually afraid enough to get into the ark, right? He was hesitating to get into the ark, but as you're saying in the story, he's also very fearful coming out of the ark. Okay, great. So I'm not going to read all of your comments, even though I'm so grateful that you're there, and I know that you're reading each other's comments, because I want to also be able to move us along. The thing that I just want to highlight from the story is, and I think that you were all seeing this, is that really fear is operating in the story in both ways. Is that what I understand that midrash is saying, is that midrash is saying sometimes fear is really important and fear is really helpful, and fear is the thing that drives us to get into the ark. That there was a time to be fearful and to build the ark and to get inside of it. And also there's a time in which we have to let the fear go, or we have to face the fear and let it go. And there was a time to leave the ark. And at a certain point, the fear was literally a thing that was holding Noah back and preventing him from leaving the ark, maybe for good reason. I'm not judging Noah, but seeing the way that the fear is actually both in this story. Okay, so I want to take a step back from Noah. If you were to say, well, what does Judaism have to say about fear? We actually have something very clear that comes from the book of Proverbs, from the book of Mishlei. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into screen sharing here. So the book of Proverbs says quite clearly and explicitly, Ashrei Adam mefached tamid, happy is the person who is fearful always. Umakshe libo yipol bera'a, and the person who hardens their heart will fall to misfortune. So I just want to read that first part one more time for you. Ashrei Adam mefached tamid. Happy is the person who is fearful always. That this verse, this pasuk, is trying to draw a correlation between fear and happiness. And to say that fear, or the quality of being fearful all of the time, is actually the key to happiness. Something a little bit counterintuitive there. I have to say, like, there's a lot of things that I associate with my own relationship to fear. I think fear can make me sad or can make me angry. It brings me a lot of anxiety. I don't normally think about fear as being the key to happiness. And so it's so interesting. What does this verse mean here? What is the relationship between fear and happiness? In what way is being fearful the key to happiness? And then the second question, so that's a question for you in the chat. what is the relationship here between fear and happiness? And the second question here is, what is the relationship between the first part of the verse, happy is the one who is fearful always, and the second part, that the one who hardens their heart will fall to misfortune? One reading of this, that the one who hardens their heart will fall to misfortune, and I'm curious to hear if you have other thoughts in the chat, is that happy is the one who is fearful always, and the one who hardens their heart, meaning the one who hardens their heart and says, I'm not afraid. The one who says, hardens their heart, sort of blocks themselves to listening to their own fear, who blocks themselves to their own experience and says, I'm not afraid. I don't need to be afraid of it. That person who in their hardness, in their sort of not letting their own emotions in, who hardens their heart, that person is going to fall into misfortune. But the person who listens to their fear, that person is going to be happy. That's one way of reading the connection between this. But I think that there's other ways we could read the first half of the verse as being connected to the second half of the verse. So I'm curious, I'll turn to the chat now. If anyone has any thoughts on how you're understanding this, what does it mean? Ashrei adam mefached tamid, happy is the one who is fearful always. I think one way of understanding this, while you're thinking about this, I think one way of understanding this is that, fear is the thing, fear is keeping us safe, right? If fear keeps us safe, then perhaps our safety is the key to our own happiness. Here, so Sarah is saying, I'm happiest, but I'm also experiencing the fragility and preciousness of life. Wow, that's beautiful. That when we confront our fear, but actually the reality of life being fragile and precious, that is a connection to happiness, really being present in the moment, experiencing our full vulnerability and happiness, that full vulnerability, and our humanity, that's a key to happiness. Beautiful. So Estelle says, a call to recognize that we can feel two seemingly opposing emotions simultaneously. That's interesting. That feels to me, Estelle, like it goes back to yirah as being both awe and fear, that this thing that we're supposed to cultivate in relationship with God, this both awe and also fear at the same time, which is it. So Jessica, it looks like you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm sorry I have such a weak voice tonight, but I couldn't say this, too many words to type. I have, for the last 7 years, been researching fear with something called the Fear Project, where we interview many people with ethnic diversity, age diversity, economic diversity, and ask them what they're afraid of. And then I collate the answers and we make a play about it, and then ask the audience what they're afraid of. And it's gone on in like 4 different countries and 7 different times. And what comes is this incredible gift of unity. So some people can be afraid of terrorists, and other people can be afraid of cops. Some people are afraid of Muslims. Some people are afraid of Jews. But the same people on the other sides of those fears can be afraid of spiders or the dark or high places. And it is incredibly unifying to find out what we're afraid of globally. And it's a way of building peace and communication, and to and then we ask, how do we conquer fear? But it's been the subject of my last few years of work.
Wow, that is beautiful, Jessica. That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I would love to see those plays. That sounds just amazing. That sounds amazing. I don't know if you have a link to your work that you could share in the chat, but I'm sure other people would want to check it out. But that is beautiful, that actually the sharing of our fears, the facing our fears, the recognizing sort of like the fragility there, the humanity, the vulnerability, like that's a thing that can bring us together and unite us. And of course, there's a happiness to that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I see that there's more comments in the chat, which is amazing. I'm just going to read one or two more out, and then we'll move back into some more text. So Cecilia says quite beautifully, opening the heart can cause fear, But without opening the heart and feeling the fear, we cannot connect to the divine or to others. And this connection is where happiness lies. So I think that that's really beautiful. It seems to me that that's capturing the idea of vulnerability, that like making ourselves vulnerable can be a really sort of, I think, Rabbi Elisa, this goes back to a little bit of your opening, that really being fully seen by others can be something that's really terrifying or something that we're afraid of. Opening the heart can cause fear, can make us fearful. But that's actually, it's by making ourselves vulnerable and opening our hearts. That's how we connect to others. And that's where the happiness is. And so then Cecilia, that you're then bringing the connection to the second part, and the one who hardens their heart, the one who doesn't make themselves vulnerable, who doesn't face that fear, that person will fall to the misfortune. It's just beautiful. Alana says, maybe if we're just staying stagnant and not taking risks, we are never really growing. And it's really important for us to explore an adventure. I feel most alive when I'm in fear and have so much uncertainty. Amazing, right? So that's amazing how it's like you could, and there's a sense in which like there's perspective there. It's like you could, in a moment in which you have so much uncertainty and you are so fearful, that could create a very negative experience. Or there could be another perspective where you take that and you embrace that fear and an uncertainty, and that sort of like initiates a feeling of feeling really alive. But that fear and uncertainty can lead to this feeling of feeling alive and this happiness, but also can bring with it great anxiety, depending on how you relate to your experience of that fear. Okay, amazing. It looks like we have one more. We had a hand up. Barbara, did you raise your hand for a moment? Looks like not Barbara, but we have Helene. Helene, do you want to unmute?
So for me, a lot of the times, somebody told me this, and I do it afraid. I do things afraid, and I ask God to help me. So to keep myself from being paralyzed by the fear, I say, God, please help me, and I do it afraid.
That's so beautiful. I think that, Helene, I love that. Thank you for sharing
that.
It's
not mine. I forget who told me it, but thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that that's for me always the question that I come back to. When do I listen to my fear and say, oh no, this fear is trying to keep me safe? And when do I say, I hear you, fear, and I'm going to ask for help and I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway? Sometimes it's hard to recognize, which path you should pursue.
I mean, it could be anything, that you're doing. Like, I remember early on when I used to study singing, I was afraid of the high notes. And I just did it afraid. I remember with my teacher, but you could apply it to anything.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm just going to read, thank you, Helene, for that. I'm just going to read one more out from the chat. Again, I see that there are many more beautiful comments that I'm not getting to read all of them. If I'm not reading them, it's not because they're not profound and impactful and powerful, but I just can't read them all right now. So Marla says, I think Susan wrote earlier, leaping into life, even with fear, will ultimately lead to happiness. Hardening the heart keeps you from experiencing the fullness of life. So again, that's just really beautiful. Leaping into life, even with our fears, taking that chance, taking those risks, that leads to happiness. Shutting ourselves off to experiences, shutting ourselves off to life, that's what's going to bring to the misfortune. Okay, so please feel free to continue putting your thoughts in the chat. I'm going to bring this back to the learning. So to the extent that Proverbs has this really clear, really unambivalent stance on fear. Happy is the person who is fearful always. The Talmud is going to come along now and really minimize and narrow the scope of that statement and say, not so fast. If we only had Proverbs saying happy is the person who is fearful always, then I am good to go. All of you who are with me on the one end of the spectrum who are feeling fearful, Proverbs has our back. But the Talmud is going to come along and say, not so fast. You want to be careful with that fear. So we're in Masechet Brachot, Daf 60a. Yehuda bar Natan was coming and going after Rab Hamnuna. So that's interesting. What is this coming and going that Yehuda bar Natan is doing? And Yehuda bar Natan sighs. He sighs a big sigh. And Rab Hamnuna said to him, do you wish to bring suffering upon yourself? As it is stated, quoting from Job, For that which I did fear is come upon me, and that which I was afraid of has overtaken me. So I just want to pause there for a second. It seems like what's going on, what is this coming and going that Yehuda Bar Natan is doing? It seems like he's pacing around the room. He's pacing back and forth. He's anxious. He's afraid of something. And so he's just sort of like going back and forth, right? Rav Hamnuna is standing still and Yehuda Bar Natan keeps going back and forth. And then finally he sighs. It seems like Rav Hamnuna interprets this sigh as being a sigh of anxiety and a sigh of fear. And interestingly enough, Rav Hamnuna, rather than saying to Yehuda Bar Natan, having this pastoral moment, saying to Yehuda Bar Natan, whoa, like what's going on? You seem upset. How can I help you? Do you want to talk about it? You seem afraid of something. Instead, Rav Hamnuna turns on him and says, what's wrong with you? Do you wish to bring suffering upon yourself? Like, what are you doing walking around fearful and sighing and pacing? What is Rav Hamnuna said that? He brings this verse from Job. I think that the basic meaning, the pshat of this verse from Job is, for that which I did fear has come upon me, that which I was afraid of has overtaken me. I think the idea of this verse from Job is, woe is me that the thing that I most didn't want to happen has come upon me. What horrible, horrible luck. I think what Rav Hamnuna is trying to say, it's not coincidence. It's not bad misfortune. The thing that it came upon you because you were afraid of it. It overtook you because you were afraid of it. That what Rav Hamnuna is trying to say is that verse from Job isn't saying it was sort of bad happenstance that it happened. It's saying it happened because you manifested it to happen because of your fear. Rav Hamnuna is saying, you better watch out, Yehuda Bar Natan, because sometimes the things that we are most afraid of in our fear and giving into that fear, we manifest those very same things. And so Rav Hamnuna, when he sees Yehuda Bar Natan pacing back and forth and sighing, he says, do you wish to bring suffering upon yourself? Amazingly, Yehuda Bar Natan is not so quick to be called out. He knows Torah. He has read the book of Proverbs like us. And Yehuda Bar Natan says, wait a second, v'hakativ, is it not written in the book of Proverbs, Ashrei hadam mifached tamid? Happy is the person who is fearful always. Yehuda Bar Natan says, I know my Torah. The Torah says, I am fine. It's a good thing to be fearful always. Don't tell me I'm going to bring about my own suffering. And Rav Hamnuna responds, Hahu b'divrei Torah kativ. That verse that is saying it is good to be fearful always, that is specifically talking about matters of Torah. But with regards to all other matters, you better be careful about your fear. You don't want that fear seeping through your life. It seems like, what does it mean here? Hahu b'divrei Torah, that is talking about words of Torah. What are the things that it's appropriate to be fearful of? It's appropriate to be in fear of God. It's appropriate to be in fear that you are not living out sort of the best version of Torah, that you are not being the best person you are in the world, that you're not sort of like living Torah in the world. But everything else, you don't want that fear. That fear is going to bring you suffering. So whereas Proverbs wanted to say, or Proverbs on the face of it, we thought what it was saying is just sort of happy as a person who is fearful always with no qualifications. Rav Hamnuna and the Gemara here are now very severely qualifying this and saying, no, you want to be careful with that fear. It is true, there are some places and manners in your life where it makes sense to cultivate that active sense of fear, right? This is taking us back to Yamim Noraim, to the days of awe, of fear. There are some matters that it is appropriate to be fearful of. Am I, staying in right relationship with God? Am I standing in the right relationship with Torah? Am I living out the values of Torah? You want to be afraid of that. Am I being the best version of myself? But everything else, you better let that fear go because it's not going to serve you. And then we have the next text that we're going to look at comes from the Talmud. It comes from Masechet Shabbat, and it actually is a story illustrating exactly that sometimes the things that we are afraid of, we come to manifest these very same things. So we'll take a look at this next text, and then I would love to turn to you in the chat again and hear your thoughts on these texts. So the background to this is that there's a Mishnah, there's a teaching in Masechet Shabbat that says that there's a certain type of sandal with spikes on it that you're not allowed to wear to go out of on Shabbat. You can't go out in the spiked sandal. And then the Talmud is like, that's interesting. What is it about the spiked sandal? You might be having the same wondering, why can't you wear spiked sandals on Shabbat? So the Talmud is then trying to ask that. So the Talmud brings some answers. I've skipped a little bit here. the Talmud brings a possible answer of why you can't wear the spiked sandal. And now the Talmud's going to offer another alternative explanation. So this is that explanation. So Rabbi Eli ben Elazar says, actually, this is the reason why you can't go out with this sandal hamesumar, the spiked sandal on Shabbat. Once they were sitting in a cave and they heard the sound of this sandal atop of the cave. If you imagine, a shoe, a soccer shoe that has cleats on it, it would make a certain noise. So it seems like I'm imagining here, it's like the Talmidei Chachamim, the scholars, the rabbis, they're sitting in a cave and they hear the sound of the spiked sandal on Shabbat. They thought that their enemies had come upon them. They associate the sound of the spiked sandal with their enemies. And in their fear that it's their enemy, they pushed one another and they killed one another in greater numbers than if the enemies had killed among them, which is to say they're in the cave. It's not clear to me if they were in the cave because they were already afraid and in hiding, or do they just happen to be a cave? They hear the sound that they associate with the enemy. They think it's their enemy coming, and they start pushing and shoving and trying to get out and trying to save themselves. And in doing that, they kill each other. They kill each other in greater numbers than if it had actually been the enemy. What we don't know in this story is, was the enemy actually there or not? I assume in the story that the enemy wasn't there at all, but actually their fear of their enemy manifested, brought about their own death. So we get another short story right after this, very similar. Rami bar Yechezkel said, actually, this is the reason. Beveit HaKnesset hayu yoshvim, they were sitting in synagogue, v'sham'u kol me'achorei beit HaKnesset, and they heard a sound coming from behind the synagogue. And implied here is they hear a sound. Again, it sounds like those spiked sandals. It sounds like those cleats. And what did they think? Sforim hayu sheba'u aleim ovim. They thought it was their enemies coming upon them. And again, they pushed one another and they killed one another in greater numbers than their enemies had killed among them. Same thing. Now, this time they're not sitting hiding in a cave. This time they're actually sitting in synagogue. Maybe they're in the middle of praying. They're in the middle of learning, whatever it is that they're doing. Again, they're taken aback. They hear the sound. And in their panic, in this holy, holy place, what do? They start pushing and shoving and trying to get out, that they end up trampling each other and killing each other in greater numbers than had it actually been their enemy. That their fear manifested the thing that they were most afraid of, even worse than had it been their actual enemy. So just taking a step back to see where we've come, that we started out with the story of Noah, where we see in the story of Noah that fear is really both helpful and harmful, that there was a time to go into the ark. There was a time where Noah's fear of the flood actually kept him safe. It caused him to take the measures he needed to do to keep his family and the animals safe. He goes into the ark. There was a time for that fear, and there's a time when that fear is harmful, when the fear holds him back and keeps him from leaving the ark. We went to Proverbs, where Proverbs gave us this very open dictum and just said, Ashrei adam mifached tamid, happy is the one who is fearful always, and perhaps the one who hardens their heart to fear, that is the person who's going to fall to misfortune. And then the Talmud of Brachot says, not so fast, some fear, the right kind of fear of God, fear of Torah, that fear is a good fear. That fear serves you, but all other fear you want to leave behind. That fear can actually get you in trouble. And then we see this story in Shabbat, a story in which their fear serves to manifest the very thing that their worst fear, their worst nightmares. Okay, I'm gonna pause the screen sharing here. I'd love to hear your thoughts, just either sort of how you're responding to these three setup texts, where it's leading you in terms of thinking about fear, what's resonating with you right now, or at the same time beginning to think about, okay, so to the extent that we're seeing some ambivalence here with what it means, how Jewish tradition is relating to fear, are we in Proverbs of happy is the person who is fearful always? Are we in Noach, where fear can be both helpful and harmful? Are we in the stories in Brachot and Shabbat, where sometimes the thing that we are afraid of, we manifest our very worst fears? When we're thinking about approaching the Yamim Noraim, when we're thinking about approaching these days of awe and fear and actively cultivating a sense of trembling before God, what does it mean? What is the type of fear we want to be cultivating in ourselves? Why do we want to show up to the Yamim Noraim trembling and fearful? what is that fear and toward what end? So feel free to, Ariella, permission to toss the stilettos, absolutely, and especially on Shabbat. So feel free to respond in the chat or to go ahead and unmute yourselves. What is the fear we should be cultivating in ourselves on the Yamim Noraim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and toward what end? Right, it's interesting. Heidi says, I keep hearing about manifestation from people, but I didn't know it can make fears come true. Sometimes we think about the ability to like manifest good things. I think I said that about finding a parking spot the other day, that we like manifested the good parking spot being available, that you can, but if you can manifest good things, if you can draw good things into your life, that perhaps you can also manifest the bad things. Your fears can manifest those bad things as well. Okay, so Charlene is answering the question of what is the fear that we want to be cultivating on the Yamim Noraim? One answer, the fear of not having met God's expectations. What happens if I stand to pray on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and I have actually failed? I haven't met the expectations God has set for me, to really be afraid of that. I guess a question there I have there is that then, is that a fear of being punished by God? Or is it something deeper? Is it also a fear of having disappointed yourself? What does it mean to not have met God's expectations? So Ruth says, this is resonating in terms of COVID and needing to protect ourselves and hesitating to take the risk to come back into society. It feels good to take the risk, but it is very ambivalent. And we don't have the kind of direction Noach had from Hashem. Right, so Ruth, thank you so much for that. I mean, for me, this I definitely do have COVID sort of in my mindset in the background. That for me, something that I think about a lot, especially with the Noach story, is that in the beginning, and in March and April of 2020, we were sort of really told, we were taught, this is something to be feared, right? This is something to be, you have to take this really seriously. This is not the flu. This is not the cold. Go in your houses, wear a mask. We can't just respond to this like anything else, right? We were taught to be afraid. And I feel like I did a really good job of internalizing that fear and being very afraid for 2 years. And now that we're sort of on the other side of something, trying to transition, I feel like I'm having to do a lot of work on myself of unlearning the fear. That there was a point where it was good to be fearful, right? It was a point where it made sense to go into the ark. And now there's a point in which it seems like what we need to do is unlearn the fear and come out of the ark. And that actually can be very hard to do, that there, as you're saying, Ruth, there's an ambivalence there. So Heidi is saying, my dad is a scientist, and even then, we don't have clear signs. And yes, Heidi just got my booster yesterday. Right, so that's interesting. So Heidi is saying, okay, so we have a little bit of like, well, Noach had the clear sign. If only we had a clear sign. It's like, even in science, we don't have those clear signs, that it's going back to taking that leap of faith into the world. The person who is raising your hand on your iPhone, I don't have your name listed, so just go ahead and please unmute yourself and tell us your name.
Laura Cooper, and I only got to go to synagogue one time, and I did have COVID, which was really scary for my family, but I didn't have like symptoms. I mean, I had symptoms, but I didn't like get really sick or anything. But I really miss synagogue. It's hard for me because I like all my friends there, and I saw a lot of them at this event, but it's not knowing for sure yet if I'm gonna get to go or not, because last year we didn't get to go to synagogue. So I have a fear of not seeing my family or friends there. That's the fear that I've been having lately. So like I keep asking my mom, and she's like, well, I don't know yet.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing that. Yeah, so that could be one of the fears that's coming up as we're approaching the Yamim Noraim. Are you going to get to see the people that you care about? Are you going to get to see your loved one? What kind of experience this is going to be? Thank you for sharing that. So Robin says, I'm challenged to associate fear with God. I associate love with God, fearful of not living up to his expectations of me, perhaps. So Robin, that's so great. the text from Masechet Brachot is giving us very clear guidance and saying it's okay to have fear, but specifically b'divrei Torah, with words of Torah, with things that are relating to God. Robin is saying, I'm not so sure I want to be associating fear with God. And Robin, that's for those of you that are going to continue on doing the learning in the Project Zoo course. This is really the kickoff to a 4-part course. This is just the beginning. You can go so much deeper. Robin, that's one of the things we're going to get into in some of the later sessions in the Zoo course. What's so amazing about the word yirah is that the word yirah is both fear of God, but also awe of God. And so there's sort of like a question of there could be these two different experiences of yirah. Like, are we, if we're talking about being in yirah of God, are we trying to cultivate in ourselves a fear of God, a fear of punishment, or is it actually sort of like a humility in the face of God's power, which could make us feel fearful, or it could give us the experience of awe and sort of like love, and what is the thing that we're trying to cultivate? And that yirah is this complicated word that actually can combine sort of a nuance of multiple meanings. So thank you for that, Robin. And so Heidi is saying, I was taught fear is the respect of God, not actual terror. Okay, interesting. Jessica says, can we tremble with awe and not fear on the high holidays? Right, so that's the question, Jessica. What is this yirah? I don't see how fear of God is helpful for redemption. Maybe that is because I grew up very afraid of the adult in my life. I don't see how holding up fear will help me towards redemption and forgiveness. Okay, so that's very powerful. So this is talking about the ways in which like fear can actually be harmful and hold us back, and is cultivating a sense of fear actually going to get us towards that place of redemption. So just raising part of what can be challenging and problematic about this aspect of fear. Ruth says, we tremble on the Yamim Noraim because we don't know how we will be seen or heard by Hashem, and we don't know exactly who we are underneath, where Hashem knows us perhaps better than we know ourselves. This is amazing because this goes back to Rabbi Liza's drasha opening at the beginning. Part of it is the fear of how we're going to be seen, and showing up on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that way, that we don't even know that God actually might know us better than we know ourselves, and we don't know what God's going to find there. I want to offer another idea of what it means to. I want to offer really two thoughts on what I think it might mean to show up on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, cultivating this sense of fear. One is, I think we want to cultivate a stance of fear that actually moves us towards action, right? So I see that we're part of why I'm a passive person here. That it's like we don't want to cultivate a sense of fear that it's like we're afraid and then we just stay in that fear, but we want to cultivate a sense of fear that actually forces us to sort of take stock of our lives and of who we want to be. Am I not living up to my own expectations, to God's expectations, whatever your theology is? Am I not the person that I need to be in this world? Is there something I need to be doing that I'm not doing? Really to cultivate a fear around that, and have that fear not just keep us in that stuck place of fearfulness and passivity, but actually have that fear move us to take that leap of faith into life, as some of you were saying, to take that risk, to make those jumps, but have that fear move us to action. So I think that we want to, to the extent that we're cultivating fear, it's not a fear that keeps us stuck, but it has to be a fear that moves us forward and causes us to take action. And the question is, what are those actions we want to take? I think another thing that I want to draw out for us is, what does it mean to show up in fear? I think part of what it means is that we're being taught you don't want to just roll into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as if it's any other day, right? That you have to actually show up as if the stakes are really high. Because maybe the stakes are really high, because maybe what we do has a real impact on ourselves, on our families, on our communities. Maybe our actions, the biggest actions and the smallest actions, maybe they actually really matter. Maybe the way that our communities show up for other communities or don't show up for other communities has a real impact in the world. And maybe lives actually hang on the line. What would it feel like? So we're like, so much of the time we're just going through the motions. I'm speaking for myself here, going through the motions of like getting my kids out the door, getting the work done that I need to get done, doing whatever it is. But it's like, what if we actually stopped and really felt everything that was at stake, that actually in the choices that we make or that we don't make, lives hang in the balance, and that what we do matters. If we could at least for some, 3 days of year when we show up to shul, really cultivate a sense of fear around that, of like, well, what if I can have an impact on the world? And what if that impact could be a negative impact? Am I negatively impacting the world? What do I need to do? What are the actions that I need to take so I'm really showing up in a full way in the new year? Who is the person that I want to be, and what are the actions that I need to take there? Okay. I'll pause there for a minute, just if there are any last comments, either if anyone wants to unmute and respond to that. How are you going to show up? With what emotion of Yirah are you going to be showing up for the Yamim Noraim? Or to the extent that you do want to show up sort of in this sense of fear, what is that fear going to be like for you? Toward what end? Feel free to put that in the chat or to unmute. Helene, yes, please.
All right, again, well, just very quickly, and I want to take a personal inventory of myself. What's the strengths, what's good, and my weaknesses, what can be improved, and how I can be, and I learned this someplace else, but it's just very helpful to just take an inventory, like when you're taking an inventory in a store, what do you need to get rid of, and what's good to keep? And so, and not to beat myself, I'm a human being, and I want to get a little bit better, I don't know if that's the right improvement. And so that's, I guess, I hope that makes sense.
It made a lot of sense, Elaine. Thank you. Yeah, I think that sounds exactly right. We want to be doing that, taking stock, that self-awareness of, what have we been doing? Where could we be better? And to take that sense of stock as if it really matters, because it does really matter, that the stakes are really high, and that for these days we really want to recognize that. Okay. So I think that I want to pull us to a close here. I want to say two things. One is, again, this is just the kickoff to a 4-part online course that you can take through SVIVAH and through Hadar. The course is called The Days of Awe and Fear. And in that 4-part course, you'll get, if you sign up for the course, you get access to the source sheets, and there are short pre-recorded videos that I've made introducing the material. You can go with a chavruta, with a learning partner, or in a small group. SVIVAH is organizing learning partners and small groups, so you can continue learning with people in this community, both building deeper relationships and going deeper into these conversations around fear, Yirah, sort of the complex nature of, do we really want to be cultivating fear of God? Is it actually awe? And what does that look like? How does fear help us? How does it hold us back? How do we find that healthy balance? So we've just begun touching these conversations. So if you're interested in doing more learning around this topic and having a chance to go in much deeper, but also to connect with other people in the SVIVAH community, learning either one-on-one or in small groups, Ariella will be sending a follow-up information with a link of how to sign up for that. We would love for you to do that. Really, I want to close with the blessing, which is to say, wherever you place yourself on the spectrum, whether you are someone that is not afraid at all and enters the world with no fears, or if you are someone that is more on the other end, holding a lot of fear, I wish for you that this is a season of self-reflection, taking stock, having awareness, and wherever you are on the spectrum, if you are wanting to move either sort of more into fear to keep you safe or more away from it, that you are able to do the self-work to get you to the place you want to be, and to take the risks that you want to take in your life, and to find that happiness, that you are seeking. Yes, Helene.
I want to just say, do you live near Newton? I just want to say, give Newton you said.
I actually live in Washington, D.C.
Oh, I thought you said you go to Hebrew College.
But I did get ordained from Hebrew College. So
okay.
I live in Boston.
Oh, okay, sorry. Anyway, I love
But Newton. I can give them your regards anyway. We have people
Newton.
in Boston.
They send me a pension check every month. Love them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Helene.
Rabbi Avi, I can't thank you enough. I think that I'm going to be sitting with the word fear often and a lot, and reflect on my own relationship to it and how it functions in the world. Thank you so much for this beautiful Torah, and also for this wonderful opportunity and invitation. I think Rabbi Lisa and I have been thinking for a while about how we can take the community that we have together and deepen it and give each other an opportunity to get to know one another more, to take the conversations that we start that feel like such a tease sometimes, take them a little bit further with each other, get to know one another a little bit better. So I know that many of you have expressed interest in trying out this amazing course that Rabbi Avi has designed, and some small learning groups too, which is a really exciting way to start moving into this new year by getting to know each other better. It's very exciting to see, and I'm excited to see that happen. I want to make sure that we have a chance to hear from Gabby Stott, who is the founding executive director of the Blue Dove Foundation. The Blue Dove Foundation, she will tell you about, but I want to make clear about why we invited them particularly here tonight. Blue Dove offers some incredible resources that are focused on educating the community about mental health, which is something that particularly over COVID, we have seen to become really a true crisis in every way. Informing ourselves, learning more about mental health, destigmatizing, talking about it, all of the above is something that's incumbent upon all of us. I love the resources that they put together, how communally focused that they are. And especially, I think, given the conversation that we've had tonight, so much of you raising so much of it in the chat, there's a lot that's going on in our heads, particularly this time of year. Stuff that makes us afraid, stuff that leaves us fearful, stuff that leaves us wondering, stuff that leaves us open-ended. And the idea of embracing the conversation around our mental health and wellness, particularly as a community, could not be more important. And I'm really thrilled and grateful to have Gabby here so that we can start off the year where mental health is integrated into our entire year from the very start. So Gabby, thank you so much for being here. We're going to add her bio to the chat, but can you please share a little bit about your work at Blue Dove, and in particular, the resources that you have for these high holidays coming up so that we can see them, know them, and use them?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ariel, for the invitation, for your friendship, for your partnership. This is not the first time that we have worked together, and it's always a pleasure to be a part of this community of women, supporting women through the Jewish lens is amazing. So Ariel already told you who I was, but I'm glad to be here. And Blue Dove, we focus on mental health, education, awareness, and outreach through a Jewish lens. And so that's really what makes us unique, is we work at that intersection of Judaism and mental health. And when we say Judaism, we say whatever identifies with somebody. It could be Jewish faith, it could be Jewish religion, spirituality, culture, whatever it is. And that sense, that connection, that overlap, we look at Judaism as a way of healing, as a way of learning, as a way of engaging. And we're still a very young organization. We're just about 3.5 years old, and it has been incredible to see how the community has changed and really leaned in to this conversation. To me, this work is personal. I lost my younger sister to an opioid overdose 5 years ago. And so it's really meaningful. And Ariel asked me to share a few minutes, since I'm the person standing between us and bed. It's late. So I'm going to take the opportunity to just share my screen here, and I will also share this specific link in the chat to our resources. Blue Dove has a webpage. You are welcome to come here for everything. One of the areas that we focus a lot on is in the holidays, and how do we connect our holidays, where we invest a lot of time and energy as individuals into mental health, mental wellness. And particularly for this upcoming new year, there is a collection of resources. There is something for everyone here, any age, whatever someone is struggling with. There's such a collection. Most of it is written and put together by our team, which is comprised of Jewish educators, Rabbi, and clinical individuals. And some of it is curated by like-minded organizations who might have something specific for what they do. And so it's been vetted by our team and approved here. But on our website, you can go to resources and Judaism and mental health, Jewish holidays, and you can see here. So I'm on the high holiday page, and you can take a screen through, go through, take a look and see what really resonates with you. This is a new resource that we worked on in collaboration with Mayim Hyde, with the Rising Tides Mikveh Network here. And so it actually has audio files and meditation to go along with it. So something different that we did, but also really meaningful from a spiritual connection that's there. So there is everything from mental health Tashlich to a mental health Rosh Hashanah Seder and Simanim, and looking at the connection between what we eat and mental wellness. We also have taken shofar blasts and connected them to this topic. So down here at the bottom, you can see, and you can kind of keep scrolling, but I pulled up two in particular. They're actually new ones from this year. So the mental health Rosh Hashanah Seder, that's here. They're very simple to follow, simple to use, and they bring a deeper intention, a deeper connection into the high holidays when used, right? So what does the pomegranate symbolize? And there are things that can be added and supplemented to what you may already use at your high holiday meals or in your studying throughout the holidays. And also Heshbon HaNefesh, accounting of the soul. And so really kind of digging into the overwhelming, the burnout, the anxieties, right? The never-ending to-do lists. How do we take that time, dive into what Jewish scholars have been asking these questions for thousands of years, and really take that time to self-reflect, right? To look at that tikkun hanefesh also, and remember to take care of ourselves. All of our resources are built with Jewish learning, intention built into those, of course, with clinical perspectives. And then everything also has an activity. And so as you go through these, what is it like to obviously read it, but then how do we also apply it to who we are and how we think, and take the time, in particular to the high holidays, to stop, to reflect, right? To think about who we are, what we've done, what we've gone through, and how we can take a moment to work on ourselves. And remember, particularly as women, we're so hard on ourselves. And if we can just give ourselves a hug and make sure we're taking care of ourselves. I mean, look at you all on the East Coast, it's 10 to 10. And we're up here and you guys are choosing to be here and to invest in yourselves too. And so thank you. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you to everybody for being here, for taking care of yourselves. I got some messages. Hi, Alana. So thank you. That's it. We're here. We're happy to be a partner. Please reach out to us, info@thebluedovefoundation.org. Follow us on social media. Stay a part of the Jewish mental health conversation. We are doing a lot on this topic, and we're fortunate to have like-minded partners like SVIVAH to help amplify and create programs that are on this topic also.
Thank you so much, Gabby. And I'm really excited to look at your website and to get all the resources. And I feel so privileged that we were able to learn with Rabbi Avi and to really get a nuanced, deep look at what fear might be and how it serves us and how sometimes it doesn't serve us, and to choose what kind of fear we want to have. Based on your class tonight, I think I'm going to call the days, the Yamim Noraim, the days of urgency instead of the days of fear, based on what you taught us tonight. And thank you so much, Gabby, for being here and for your resources. And I'm sure that they will really be helpful for all of us. I wanted to wish everybody here a Shana Tova, a happy, healthy new year. And I want to invite you to put in the chat your blessings for everyone in this community and for our world as to the kind of year that you bless them with. So please put in your blessings in the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Ariella, the dynamo behind all of this.